Let me start with a common misconception. Debt. It does not become unsustainable when the number gets too big. It becomes unsustainable when the system can no longer carry it. And that distinction is everything in markets. Debt is a flow problem, not a stock problem. Most people look at debt as a headline figure. Debt to GDP, total outstanding, trillions. Those numbers matter politically, but they are not what breaks systems. What breaks systems is far more prosaic. It's cash flow. Debt is sustainable as long as it can be rolled, it can be funded, it can be serviced. The moment any of those fail, the math changes instantaneously. And history is clear on this. Look at every major debt crisis. Spain in the 16th century, France before the revolution, Weimar Germany, Latin America in the 1980s, the Eurozone periphery in 2011 with the pigs. The problem was never the absolute level of debt. The problem was rising funding costs, collapsing confidence, loss of market access. Debt stops being sustainable when rollover risk becomes dominant. Sustainability is a confidence trick, a confidence loop. Debt sustainability is not mechanical, it's reflexive. As long as your creditors and lenders believe refinancing will occur, policy will support markets, inflation or growth will dilute the burden, they keep lending with alacrity. Once that belief cracks, it doesn't crack gradually, it snaps. Why debt can appear fine until it isn't is a mystery that I love talking about. For long periods, high debt looks manageable. Rates are low, auctions clear, spreads stay tight. That creates one thing: complacency. But sustainability is not tested in calm conditions. It's tested when volatility rises, rates move quickly, liquidity thins out and then disappears. That's when the leverage truly reveals itself. And the role of rates in this is pivotal, and with it comes a common error. Because people obsess over rate levels, but that's the wrong variable. What matters is the speed of rate changes, the delta, the vol, the second derivative, the term structure, the duration exposure embedded in the balance sheets, and their inherent mismatch. Debt fails under rate shock, not high rates per se. A slow, predictable rate environment is adaptable, adaptive, survivable. A fast repricing definitely isn't. That's when the system becomes brittle. So why is the modern system so fragile, even though we're at the height, the apogee of our financial engineering prowess? Today's system is simply saturated with duration. Banks saturated, pensions overflowing, insurers drowning, governments readily suffocating. Everyone borrowed long and cheap, and that worked as long as yields stay compressed. But when yields move too fast, asset values fall precipitously, collateral shrinks, funding costs rise vertiginously. The same debt becomes unsustainable without any new borrowing having to take place. That's what happened to us in the world in 2008. 2008, the issue was not mortgage defaults alone or the tranches of toxic debt. It was leveraged balance sheets funded on short-term paper. When funding markets froze, perfectly solvent institutions completely evaporated and collapsed. The debt didn't change. The conditions did. When central banks step in, this is when it changes and matters. This is why central banks need to intervene before the debt formally becomes unsustainable. They are not saving borrowers. They are protecting rollover mechanics, serviceability and survivability. Because once debt has to actually be liquidated instead of rolled over, the game is over, the jig is up. So policy acts early, and thankfully so. They suppress vol, they cap the yields, they backstop funding, they issue stimulus, not because debt is healthy, but because its failure would be unfathomably catastrophic. There's an illusion to debt sustainability, and this creates a dangerous illusion. Debt appears sustainable because policy simply keeps it so. Markets interpret this as strength. It isn't. It's dependence. Each cycle requires more intervention, lower tolerance for stress, faster response. That's not resilience. That is fragility masked as stability. There's a historical parallel for this. A place near and dear to my heart where I grew up. Well, not obviously in post-war Britain, but in Britain. In post-war Britain, after World War II, Britain's debt exceeded 250% of GDP. It did not default, but it did not outgrow the debt either. It used a different toolkit: financial repression, yield caps, inflation, and the debt remained sustainable, only because returns were suppressed. Creditors paid the price quietly. They were supporting the rebuilding post-war and reconstruction effort. That is one way debt ends. Another ending, however, is market revolt. The other ending is much faster, much more brutal, and ends up sometimes in revolution. Think Argentina. Think Italy, 2011. Think the UK pension crisis only in 2022. The yields spiked, collateral broke, forced selling begetted more forced selling. Debt stops being sustainable because markets refuse to carry it. Policy then has to face a choice. They either intervene or they allow the collapse. That choice defines regimes. As a trader, from the perspective of myself and other traders, we should be watching the wrong signals so that we don't miss it. Let me rephrase that. Watch the signals so that you're not wrong and so you don't miss it. Equities are a terrible signal for debt stress. They can rally right up until the sustainability breaks, and thereafter. The real signals are always elsewhere, and don't take my word for it. Backtest the history. It's always credit spreads, auction fat tails, funding markets, FX vol, FX pressure, debt crises, and bond market events, not stock market ones. Sustainability and unsustainability can come along suddenly. There is no gradual warning bell. Debt does not fall linearly. It flips from manageable to unfundable and untenable and unpalatable and unworkable. The moment investors doubt rollover, duration becomes toxic matter. Liquidity disappears, evaporates, spreads gap, policy scrambles, and that's when inflation is often a choice. Why is inflation chosen? When faced with unsustainable debt, governments choose inflation. It's a tool. It's not ideal, but it's because it's survivable. It erodes the real debt, it avoids the explicit defaults, it preserves the nominal contracts value, default is politically fatal, so they choose not to do it. Inflation is quietly redistributed, but there is a modern constraint. Because today, debt stops being sustainable not when the GDP slows like you would imagine, but when policy credibility meets market arithmetic. As long as central banks intervene, as long as they can intervene, as long as currencies maintain confidence, funding markets will perpetually function. Debt will always be rolled, but when any of those fail, it simply isn't. So what comes next? Unsustainable debt does not end in one way. It ends in combinations of repression, financial inflation, restructuring, regime change. It ends in all of those ways. What it does not do is resolve in a pristine and clean fashion. There are key mistakes that we all make as traders and investors. We wait for the official acknowledgement. By the time the debt is declared unsustainable, markets have already repriced violently. Sustainability ends before it's even admitted. And there's a final reality that we all would do well to abide by. Debt is not immoral. It's not a policy error. It is a tool. But like all tools, they have their limits. When those limits are reached, debt does not negotiate. It forces immediate adjustment. And that's what we're seeing around the world now, especially in places like the UK, where the bond markets are coming back with a vengeance to decide policy and the fates of the political class. Debt stops being sustainable when confidence, liquidity, and rollover ability fail. Not when the headlines change, not when politicians argue, not when economists revise their forecasts. Markets will always tell you first, quietly, and then, like Hemingway said, all at once. And then we went broke. My name's Justin Bunton. This is the House of Trade. Ciao for now.